Hello and welcome to this tutorial on how to sew the perfect dress for fall. You can find the link to the pattern in the description. I'm starting by cutting out my pattern pieces. The seam allowance of 1 cm is included and I'm marking all 9 notches. I'm refolding the fabric after cutting the first pattern pieces so I can cut the front and back piece on fold. Choose the length of your skirt and mark the respective measurements as stated in the instructions onto your fabric. In the end, you'll have 6 rectangles, 1 for the first tier, 2 for the second tier, and 3 for the third tier. I'm also cutting my interfacing pieces for the collar lining. Now I'm sewing together the skirt tiers. I'm forming 3 loops, sewing them on the short sides. Afterwards, I'm ironing my interfacing to the lining. And then we'll sew together the lining pieces at the shoulder seams. And I'm also sewing the shoulder seams of the front and back bodice pieces. Next up, I'm finishing the outer edge of the collar lining. Here we have the main bodice and lining pieces, and I'm pinning them together at the collar so I can sew all around the V neckline. Make sure you have right sides facing each other and that you have aligned the shoulder seams. Most importantly, you need to clip the seam allowance at the V-neck in order to get that very neat result in the end. I'm now understitching the seam allowance to the lining so that the lining won't be visible from the right side of the garment. Now I'm also top stitching the lining to the shoulder seam. The next step is to attach the sleeves to the bodice. Pin all around, make sure to align the front part with the front bodice and the back part with the back bodice. If you don't have a serger, you can also sew together the sleeves to the bodice with a straight stitch on your sewing machine and use a zigzag stitch for finishing the seam. Now we can easily close the sleeves and bodice in one go by sewing together the sleeves on the bottom seam all around until the side seam of the bodice. Onto the skirt. I'm dividing each tier into halves, fourths, eighths, and for the third and second tier also sixteenths. Next up, I'm going to pin the third to the second tier by aligning every marking we just set. Like this, I'm just pinning them together at every marked point. My favorite gathering method is to gather the skirt tier by hand in between the marked points, but you can also use different gathering methods if you prefer those. Afterwards, we proceed exactly the same for sewing the second to the first skirt tier. Here's a close-up on how I gather the fabric by hand while I'm sewing. And we're going to do the same thing for attaching the skirt to the bodice. I'm marking the halves and fourths and eighths, and I'm aligning those to the skirt. And I'm sewing and gathering again at the same time. If you want to sew the drawstring version, sew the waist tunnel piece to the waist seam and fold over the seam allowance at the top stitching the tunnel closed all around the wall. It should look like this from the inside afterwards. The next step is to finish the hem of the skirt and sleeves. I'm sewing a cuff to the end of my sleeves, but this is optional. In the original instructions, you just need to fold over the hem to form a tunnel for the elastic. After inserting the elastic, I'm sewing it close with my sewing machine, and I'm also sewing close the gap I left for inserting the elastic. The last step is to fold over and top stitch the finished hem of the skirt. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and see you in the next one.